Most of us remember the picture of the crying young man carrying the limp body of Hector Peterson on June 16, 1976. That photograph captured some of the spirit of those times and became a symbol in itself. That is the power of a stills camera. While we on television can show the movement and the sound, a photograph can freeze a special moment or face for us to look at over and over. Let's turn our cameras on 4 award-winning photographers who have captured many of the dramatic, defining moments of the Truth Commission process.
This year, the series of pictures with Jeff Benzine were, for me, by far the strongest pictures. The strongest, the most disturbing pictures.
During his amnesty hearing in July this year, Jeffrey Benzine, one of the most feared security policemen in the Western Cape during the 1980s, was asked to demonstrate his infamous wetbag method of torture. The request came from one of his victims, former MK commander Tony Ngeni. These are some of the images that made the headlines the following day.
I first got to hear about Jeff Benzine in the 80s when he was torturing people, and they were untouchable. I mean, you couldn't ask them questions related to it, you could do nothing. There were 3 or 4 photographers, and it happened very quickly. One of the judges asked if anybody had a bag or a cloth or whatever. I jumped across the line because Benzine now got over onto the guy's back and he was about to pull the bag over his head. And it was very quick. I didn't know whether to shoot a wide shot, and at the end of it I thought to myself, what I'd want to get here is the image, is the expression on his face. Watching his eyes twitch, watching his hands move. I felt sorry for him. He's had a lot of bad press. I mean, he's had a lot of pictures of him with this, doing the wetbag treatment on almost every single paper across the country. And for that whole week running, I mean, his name was all over. I think at the end of the day, even if he does get amnesty, his image and his name will be tarnished forever. And it's a pity that he has children that have to see this and have to live with that.
Leon Muller has been covering the Truth Commission since day one. That first emotional day in East London when nobody knew what to expect, until victim after victim started pouring out their gut-wrenching stories. The day the Archbishop himself was overcome with emotion.
We were actually restricted not to sort of take pictures at that time when that sort of happened, when we heard the Archbishop sort of broke down. And we all fled out of there, which was the media room, to try and get pictures of it. With the result, we got there and it was all over and done with. But then I captured the moment where his wife came and sort of comfort him and actually brought him a cup of tea. It was also very touching. I mean, even people the caliber of the Archbishop can sort of break down.
I had survived a grueling day, that first day. And this was the last witness, and that is what it did to me. I couldn't take it anymore, and that is when I broke down too. Leah has been, as she has always been sort of throughout this interesting time that we have lived through. She's been there for me, for us, and it's been tremendous, and I can never thank her enough.
Muller is adamant that he doesn't easily become emotionally involved in his work, but he admits that he was deeply touched when he took this picture of Mrs. Joyce Mthimkhulu holding up bits of hair of her activist son, Sipiwe Mthimkhulu, who was tortured, poisoned, and eventually murdered by the notorious Eastern Cape Security Police.
And everybody was stunned by that. You know, you hear this, all those sort of things that came out of it when she hauled out this piece of ball of hair.
There's a real cooperation. I mean, I'm asking somebody if they will be photographed, which means I'm going into their territory, or if I'm not in their territory, then I'm trying to be in their emotional territory, so to speak. And it's very much, it has to be a two-way process.
GILLIAN EDELSTEIN has worked abroad for more than a decade. This year, she published a set of portraits on the truth and reconciliation process in the New York Times and several other international publications.
I haven't stopped coming home, and when I started watching what was going on, especially in terms of the Truth Commission, it really struck a chord. I mean, it's absolutely a universal subject, one of forces of good and evil that are completely universal. And it reminded me, I guess, of the Nuremberg trials, and maybe being a Jewish white South African said a lot. And it seemed a very obvious thing for me to do, and one that I felt extremely motivated to do. Joyce Mthimkhulu, the visit to her in the township, her dignity, her anger, her fortitude. I had heard that she still had the hair of Simpiwe, and I asked her how she felt about having them in the photograph. And we're in her backyard, and she held this up, and it reminded me of a kind of black power symbol or something, this kind of symbol of power. And it symbolized her pain and her power, and it was, I think that picture is incredibly expressive of those two things: the frown on her brow, the hair in her hand, the anger, the pain that she's carrying. I went to Kutse's house in Pretoria, and immediately I was struck by the phenomenal, you know, that he's actually incarcerated himself. This doesn't matter what happens in the future or in the past, he is in prison himself, and that's what it seemed to me. And I kept noticing that we had this kind of tea on T-bone china or whatever it was, nice sort of cutlery, and he kept walking around with this little wallet. And finally I said to him, "What is in that wallet?" And he said, "It's my gun." So he said, "I go everywhere with it." He said, "I go to the toilet with it. I go to the bathroom with it." And I said, "Well, then how do you feel about being photographed with this incredibly important utensil?" And he said, no, that would absolutely be fine. And then he held it with this mixture of power and fear. It's a set of portraits, and I would hope that it's a truthful and honest set of portraits of people who've been involved in a historical drama, really.
When I first started photographing this process, I didn't know what was going on. It was a totally new and novel experience. I think the biggest shock for me was when I had to photograph Captain Benzine, showing how he tortured people.
But as the official photographer of the TRC, George Hallett's work has to go beyond photographing the main players in the drama of the Truth Commission.
I think the TRC also wants to make clear that besides what's happening on the stage, there's also a process that takes place in the offices behind closed doors or a door slightly ajar. There are researchers, there are people that dig and find the information that's necessary to make this process work. There are all kinds of people that do different things. There's a process there. I'm not a photojournalist per se. I think I regard myself more as a photo historian. But what is important to me is that people have short memories. And I want to keep people's memories alive.
I have to pay a very warm tribute to all of you in the media, but in this case particularly to stills photographers, for a tremendous job of work in communicating the Commission to the nation.
Here lies the wisdom of forgiveness, in bright colors of life, a gift to all humanity. Here lies the power of love, with a soulful understanding of the necessity for a change. Why all this compromise when we know what to do? Let's take the spear and put it right inside of this evil monster, so we can learn to be free.